Regardless how and when we believe we are going to be taken to heaven, we must rid ourselves of the idea that Jesus is coming to rescue a broken, desperate church. That lie has dislocated many generations of revolutionaries from their purpose in the same way a joint is pulled out of place. It has put the church in a defensive posture of occupation to protect what we have instead of positioning ourselves for the purpose of increase, as is God's intention. We love happy endings. It's part of being made in God's image. Just think about some of the most popular movies of all time. At the end of the Star Wars trilogy, Luke Skywalker faced off against the Emperor. If you remember the scene, Luke simply dropped his lightsaber, forcing his true father, Darth Vader, to make a choice. He could either watch his son die, or he could kill the Emperor. He valiantly chose to save his son. The rebels won, and there was once again peace in the galaxy. In the movie Shawshank Redemption, Andy was a man wrongly accused for the murder of his wife. He spent a lifetime in Shawshank prison under the watchful eye of the evil warden. The last scene of the movie captures Andy and his friend Red meeting on a beach in the Pacific. Finally free from the evil warden. The list of happy movie endings goes on and on because we never tire of that kind of story. Roy Hobbs hit the last home run in The Natural. The Grinch returned all the toys in The Grinch That Stole Christmas. And Ebenezer Scrooge became a changed man in A Christmas Carol. The Bible also has a happy ending. Initially, the book of Revelation can seem confusing, with graphic imagery such as dragons, crowns, sealed scrolls, and trumpets. It can feel overwhelming at first. Add to that the fact that so many ministries have gone mad with predictions about the signs of the rapture and the end times. It's all a sad distraction from the invitation to rule and reign with Christ right here and right now in this world. To understand Revelation, we must first understand it was a real letter written to real people in the 1st century AD. Much of our generation became so self-centered that we assumed John was ignoring everyone who came before us. I can remember a good friend of mine calling me during the Gulf War in 1991. She said, since the Iraqi oil wells were on fire, the sky would become dark over all the world, like it says in Revelation 6. And then the end would come. I can remember other friends talking about how the 10 crowns on the head of the beast in Revelation 13 represented the Soviet Union, because they were pretty bad. They predicted the beast, i.e. the Russians, would shoot nuclear missiles at the United States, then America would shoot back, and then the end would come. I can remember when a radio personality got the idea of Christ coming back on May 21st, 2011. He and his followers bought a bunch of billboards telling people the end of the world was in a week. So do what you need to do, but it's all going down. They rented stadiums around the world and sang Kumbaya until midnight. The suspense must have been nearly unbearable. They waited and waited and waited, and nothing happened. It must have been an uncomfortable ride home that night. Now, I believe in planning and being prepared. However, we must let the Bible interpret the Bible. And we clearly are not supposed to start living in defeat, inventing dates, camping out on our rapture rug and living in fear. That was never the intention of biblical end-time prophecies. Concerning that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. Matthew 24:36. There was once a seminary student who spent 3 whole years studying eschatology, that's the study of the end times. The day before graduation, he went to the seminary gym to work out. There he spotted the school janitor with his Bible open to the book of Revelation. The prideful young seminary student strutted over and asked, "Sir, how can you, a janitor, possibly know what that book means?" The janitor didn't even look up. He simply replied, "Well, that's pretty easy." The student responded proudly, "Oh yeah? Then tell me, what exactly does Revelation mean?" With a smile, the old man simply said, "We win." The message in the book of Revelation is so simple, we have often missed it completely. We win. Frankly, it's quite an encouraging way to end a collection of books intended for the lost, lonely, and lacking. And the best part of all is it's true. Let's read one of the first sections of the book of Revelation to see if we can get some sign of the victory. Revelation chapter 1 verses 12 through 18 says, "Then I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me. And on turning I saw 7 golden lampstands, and in the midst of the lampstands one like a son of man, clothed with a long robe, and with a golden sash around his chest. The hairs of his head were white, like white wool, like snow. His eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like burnished bronze, refined in a furnace, and his voice was like the roar of many waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars. From his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in full strength. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. But he laid his right hand on me, saying, 'Fear not, I am the first and the last, and the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore. And I have the keys of death and Hades.'" The shining person with the golden sash is Christ. The man falling at his feet is the Apostle John. Now, to put this in its proper context, we need to remember that John spent 3 full years with Jesus on earth. He practiced such an awareness of the compassion of Christ for himself personally that he called himself the disciple who Jesus loved. This was a close relationship. This vision of Christ came at least 30 years later. During all of that time, John and Jesus didn't miss a beat. They still talked with each other. They still walked with each other in the Spirit. They still loved each other. In fact, John was in exile at the time he wrote the book of Revelation for his very controversial first-hand preaching of his friend Jesus. So what did John do when he got his first glimpse of the glorified Jesus in heaven? When John saw Jesus Christ, the conqueror, the King, John was overwhelmed by the glory. He was completely undone. Jesus' opening line was the same line he always used when humans saw his resurrected body: "Fear not." He had to say that because John was still in his mortal form. Thus, the opening of the story of Revelation gives us the first clue about the end of our own story. Jesus is more powerful than we know, and he is going to bring a full and final justice. Revelation chapter 19 verses 11 through 16 says, "Then I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. The one sitting on it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes are like a flame of fire, and on his head are many crowns. And he has a name written that no one knows but himself. He is clothed in a robe dipped in blood, and the name by which he is called is the Word of God. And the armies of heaven, arrayed in fine linen, white and pure, were following him on white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword, with which to strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. He will tread the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God Almighty. On his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. We instinctively know from many stories that when the king shows up on his white horse with his armies behind him, things are about to change. When Christ the King shows up on his white horse, it's all over but the shouting, and the outcome is certain. There really are only two more things for him to do, which is to conquer death itself, and to send the devil and all who chose to follow him where they belong. He will do that in the very next chapter. And the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet were. Revelation 20, verse 10. The enemy is finally defeated and sent somewhere from which he will never, ever escape. Fear, depression, hunger, disease, pain, poverty, war, violence, and all suffering are now destroyed and done away with so completely that we can't even remember them if we tried. In their place is endless goodness, truth, and beauty, expanding forever, saturated in the eternal life-giving love of God. Revelation chapter 21 verses 1 through 6 says, Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. And he who was seated on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. Also he said, Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give from the spring of the water of life without payment. It's a new heaven and a new earth. God the Father literally moves heaven to earth to be with us. And we now live as friends for all eternity. Remember that same man who carried the cross, hung on Calvary, and forgave the thief? You get to take as many hikes with him as you want down near the river. You get to eat, drink, laugh, love, and grow. Love wins, and love is a person. That means God wins. It means the kingdom will finally come in all its power and glory. It means your mission will be complete. When God wins, we win. Who stands to gain ground in the war? By giving God's people a distorted view of the end times and a distorted view of heaven. The deceiver. The devil is a liar, and his strategy goes something like this. Satan says to himself, let's see if I can keep the church immature forever, so that Jesus will never be able to return for his victorious bride. So let's slow down the whole process by convincing Christians to accept mediocrity as God's will for them. That will take the fight out of them. Let's convince them to believe that suffering is good, and healing and provision is only for a select few that God sometimes chooses. Let's convince them that everything I do to harm them is the will of God. We do well to remember Satan is a liar, and lies about God sound like truth to those of us who keep listening to them, even when they have been preached in churches. Remember, the Bible doesn't say that love sets us free. Jesus said that the truth sets us free. John 8:32. And it only sets us free when we know the truth. When the truth replaces a lie that we had previously been believing. Loving people is wanting people to be free. That is why love rejoices in the truth. 1 Corinthians 13:6. Revelation chapter 5 verse 10 says, "You have made them a kingdom and priests to our God, and they shall reign on the earth." The reason God is training us as warriors is we are going to reign with him on this earth. In short, he is training us to reign. God is giving us an inheritance that will be ours forever, which will never spoil nor fade. And what we learn here, right now, on this fallen earth, is creating in us the character to reign in the unfallen kingdom that will soon be ours. No conversation will be the same. No relationship, no job, no trial, no mission. It all changes as we realize Christ the King is right now training us for battle and preparing us to reign with him forever. At the end of the last battle from the series The Chronicles of Narnia, the children find themselves on the new earth. Here is their experience. As he spoke, he no longer looked to them like a lion, but the things that began to happen after that were so great and beautiful that I cannot write them down. And for us, this is the end of all the stories, and we can most truly say that they all lived happily ever after. But for them, it was only the beginning of the real story. All their life in this world and all their adventures in Narnia had only been the cover and title page. Now at last they were beginning chapter 1 of the great story, which no one on earth has read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. My friends, what we are experiencing now is nothing more than our first few weeks of God's Kingdom boot camp, or as C.S. Lewis says, the cover and title page of the story. And so now it is time. It is time to arise as warriors. It is time to fight. It is time to take back what is rightfully ours. It is time to restore what has been stolen, lost, and destroyed. It is time to retake the land. And finally, it is time to send the enemy back where he belongs. The whole world waits longingly for the children of God to arise and claim the land on behalf of the returning king. The abused, maligned, mistreated wait for the coming of the kingdom. The homeless, sightless, and faithless wait for you to exercise your God-given authority and act boldly on their behalf. The world waits, lost and dying, for the church to finally shake off all deception and fight once again for our true inheritance. Will you fight?